Your expert is Jennifer Verdolen, an associate professor at the University of Arizona and an animal behavior scientist, author, speaker, and conservationist. She earned a PhD in ecology and evolution from Stony Brook University, and she wrote the popular nonfiction books Wild Connection and Raised by Animals.
Welcome to Iceland. Welcome to Iceland. There is fire, there is ice, and there is so much more to this magnificent island nation. Just as some of Iceland's glaciers, like Breiðamerkurjökull, extend well below sea level, there is more to Iceland than first meets the eye. Iceland's cultural identity is deeply connected to the landscape and reflects the energetic, natural environment of the island. Whether it's through literature, art, music, or food, the relationship Icelanders have with nature is profound and extensive. Perhaps due to its isolation and harsh landscape, there has always been an intense bond between Icelanders and the natural world. This course will explore all of these important aspects of Iceland. You'll see how the environment, history, and people come together to create a truly dynamic country that has much to offer visitors and the contemporary world. Awe-inspiring natural features like the northern lights and geothermal pools become opportunities to learn from nature. Iceland's fascinating history, folklore, and tradition allow for a greater appreciation of our world. I first went to Iceland in 2018, and it changed me in so many unexpected ways. Because I was teaching a field course for undergraduate students and I'm a biologist, I was initially only focused on the plants and animals, especially the irresistible birds. What happened during my time in Iceland was that I became more intrigued by the history, the people, and their culture. I expanded my perspective from Iceland is a place of beauty to experience more deeply everything Iceland has to offer. Many bird enthusiasts long to go to Iceland. It is one of the best places to see hundreds of thousands of pelagic seabirds. To mate and raise the next generation, they make their annual migration to the seaside cliffs. There are puffins, kittiwakes, fulmars, Arctic terns, and many more. Even though it can be difficult, there are many plants to identify. It can get pretty tough to tell moss species apart. But something else captured my attention along the way. As a behavioral ecologist concerned with conservation, I know that the future of wildlife is intertwined with people. How people interact with nature and wildlife informs and predicts how they will approach conservation. My goal on that first visit was to understand the connections between the diversity of Iceland's plants and animals, the history of the people that settled this isolated and remote northern island, and how Iceland as a country today was approaching conservation and sustainability. To do that, I dug deep into Iceland's past, from its formation as an island to how it was settled. I explored the challenges that people faced surviving, not just in a harsh climate, but with the constant geohazard presented by the active volcanoes scattered across the island. I started to understand that Icelanders do not distinguish between themselves and nature. Instead, they see themselves as a part of nature, in part due to the intimate relationship and dependence on the land and bounty of the seas that persists to this day. And yet the story of Iceland's relationship to nature mirrors what we see in other places. After it was settled, it quickly came to bear the scars of a human-modified landscape. Forests were cleared, and some species were hunted to extinction. These conflicts continue to this day, with many farmers killing Iceland's only native land mammal, the Arctic fox, and hunting one of Iceland's most admired birds, from the tourist perspective, the Atlantic puffin. It turns out that Iceland's connection to nature is both beautiful and complicated. The same can be said of Icelandic culture and history. Humans can be a cause for wildlife decline as we grow and consume more resources and expand into natural habitats. That being said, we can also be mindful of the environment and live sustainably without causing harm. There's a lot to learn from Iceland's history and its current practices regarding how people impact the land. Despite its isolation for centuries, people from around the globe have been enamored with and inspired by Iceland. J.R.R. Tolkien studied Old Norse mythology, including the famous Icelandic sagas. These are the stories of the great heroic families, among the first to live in Iceland in the early days of settlement. Tolkien's historic and revered work, The Hobbit, and its sequel, The Lord of the Rings, was influenced by at least 5 of these: the Eyrbyggja saga, Egil's saga, Laxdæla's saga, the saga of Grettir the Strong, and Njal's saga. According to several scholars, Tolkien's hobbits are inspired by the families in the sagas. Why? The hobbits are incredibly welcoming and provide food. Honor and hospitality are themes in Njal's saga. Hugithurd, the wife of Gunnar, sends a servant to steal food after a neighbor refuses to help Gunnar during a famine. This leads to a feud common in Icelandic sagas, which eventually leads to the death of most of the key players, also a common feature. Both hobbits and Icelanders love to pay homage to their ancestors. In The Lord of the Rings, this is manifested with the legacy of the Tux family lineage. In the sagas, Icelanders frequently are loyal along family lines during clashes. Lastly, hobbits dress in bright colors. The traditional clothing of Icelanders were blue and black silk gowns covered in fur robes. They were also decorated with silver and gold and other ornate armor characteristic of the Viking warriors. Icelanders may not have real hobbits, but they do have huldufólk, or hidden people, the elves of Icelandic folklore. The folk tales of Iceland are not as well known to outsiders as the sagas. You will find that within Iceland, a few people do take the existence of elves very seriously. Many Icelanders are skeptical, but still maintain respect for these traditional stories. Magic abounds with stories of trolls, half-trolls, ghosts, and supernatural beings. And honestly, that is how it feels when you visit Iceland, like there's a little bit of magic sprinkled everywhere you go. At the moss-covered forest near Lake Mývatn, I was certain a little enclave would make a perfect house for an elf. The Reyðarfellsgötu Gorge in Botsfjak Mountain on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula is often obscured by a thin layer of clouds and mist until you're near the entrance. Reyðarfellsgötu Gorge, which means Red Cloak Rift, is where the half-giant Báþush is said to have thrown his nephews in the Báþush saga. Because of the close connection of the culture to the land, it's impossible not to be enchanted by the tales and views. It's easy to imagine the half-giant and his wrath as you pass through the mist to climb a steep slope to the mouth of the gorge. As British academic and politician James Bryce stated in Studies in History and Jurisprudence, Iceland is known to most men as a land of volcanoes, geysers, and glaciers. But it ought to be no less interesting to the student of history as the birthplace of a brilliant literature in poetry and prose, and as the home of a people who maintained for many centuries a high level of intellectual cultivation. Nor ought it be less interesting to the student of politics and law, as having produced a constitution unlike any other whereof records remain, and a body of law so elaborate and complex that it's hard to believe it existed among men whose chief occupation was to kill one another. This passage encapsulates the many layers one uncovers when setting out to truly explore Iceland. Whatever subject you may be interested in, Iceland is sure to have it. Each subject overlaps with the other to form an intricate, delightful tapestry. As you learn about the land, you'll inevitably learn folklore, language, and conservation matters. To better understand the flora and fauna, you'll get exposed to fascinating history. Iceland's relatively long isolation has led to a culture firmly grounded in its history. Icelanders are one of the most literate, well-read people in the world. The country's physical separation from the rest of Europe has led to an interesting consequence. Their language has remained largely the same since the island was settled some 11 centuries ago. It can be a very complex language to learn despite following the same rules as other Nordic languages of the subject, verb, object word order. Depending on who you ask, Icelandic is considered one of the most difficult languages in the world, especially for English speakers. You will not find it on common language learning programs like Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, or Babbel. Icelandic is almost completely lacking in Latin, Greek, English, or Danish words. It's also one of the few languages that doesn't have any within-country geographical variation or dialects. Furthermore, Iceland has policies in place to conserve and protect their language, and these policies are supported by a majority of the population. Icelanders are very proud of their language and are extremely determined to continually develop and preserve it for future generations. There is a strong tradition of resisting the use of loanwords, even in response to new technology. Instead, Icelandic is a living language, growing in vocabulary stemming from the language's roots. Linguists of the Language Planning Department are tasked with maintaining their language and making sure to keep it up to date. For example, television is sjónvarp, taking the ancient word for vision, sjón, and throw, varp, to illustrate how a TV shows images. The careful preservation of Icelandic is important in keeping the culture alive by appreciating the old and making concerted efforts to be in the present. Like any language, there are words and concepts that would be difficult at best to translate. Seiðijóst literally means the time of day when there is just enough light to see your sheep. It's used to describe the hazy moment before dawn. I love languages and understanding their origin and evolution. From my perspective, Icelandic is a layered puzzle to work through. Learning to speak Icelandic is incredibly demanding, often leaving people tongue-twisted. For this course, I chose to use many of the Icelandic terms and names for any given topic. There's a lot of effort and pride in maintaining this language, so I wanted to respect and appreciate it by using Icelandic words. Throughout the varying subjects, I'll do my best to pronounce the words correctly. Some repetition of phrases and concepts over the course of the lectures will help attune your ears to the language as I speak it. I certainly appreciate your patience with my non-native pronunciations and hope you enjoy picking up some new vocabulary. Despite the difficulty, one of the things that I find beautiful about Icelandic is how descriptive the language is. Take the word snow. According to a blog written by Lela Erladottir, there are at least 85 words for snow. Why so many? Well, each one describes the type of snow and the conditions surrounding it. Beljörs would be analogous to a blizzard, but there is no simple blizzard in Iceland. There could be a kafaltsjárnbeljush or a moldbeljush. The latter one means you can't see farther than an inch in front of your face. Names for places and natural features are of course very important in Icelandic. You will notice repeating suffixes and sounds throughout the course. Here are a few that you will hear frequently on our journey. Fjordjush, a fjord, like Ísafjörður. Foss, a waterfall, as in Gullfoss or Skoðafoss. Jökull, a glacier, like Vatnajökull. Staðir, a place, as in the town of Egilsstaðir. Hafn, a port or harbor, as in the village of Hafn. Vík, a cove, bay, or inlet, as in Vík í Mýrdal, also known as Vík, where you can see the puffins. Fjöll, a river, as in Lagarfjöll, which is also a lake. Veldis, fields, as in Þingvellir, the fields where Alþingi assemblies were held. And vatn, water, used for lakes, as in Mývatn. The name of the lake in Icelandic, Mý means midge, and Vatn means lake, translates into the Lake of the Midges. The name comes from the large number of midges present in the summer. We'll focus on this very special lake for now. The fourth largest, Lake Mývatn, isn't a deep lake, but it is a remarkable area in Iceland. It is situated in the northern portion of Iceland, just east of Akureyri, and close to the Krafla volcano. It is steeped in culture, tradition, and history. The biological, geological, and cultural uniqueness of this area of Lake Mývatn, along with the river Laxá, was named a UNESCO Heritage Site in 2011. 2,300 years ago, hot lava flowed into the lake, and when it hit the cold water, there were massive steam explosions. These explosions spit lava and water up into the air. Where the lava and water collided, they created what are called pseudocraters. These look like little islands which are scattered throughout the lake. The most famous is a row of craters called Skútustaðageir, which have been afforded special protection status. Lake Mývatn has another special feature, lake balls. They are called cladophora balls, moss balls, or marimo, a Japanese word. Mari is a bouncy play ball. Mo is a generic term for plants that grow in water. They are a rare type of algae that clump together in the shape of a ball. They are common in Lake Akan in Japan and in Lake Mývatn in Iceland. In Icelandic, they are called hulusketish, which is a colorful description referring to the difficulty these algal balls cause for fishermen who get their nets tangled up in them. These algal balls are what we might call bioindicators. They are very sensitive to levels of nutrients in the water, like nitrogen and phosphorus. Too much, and they start disappearing. That is what was happening after 1978 in Lake Mývatn, when pollution from fertilizer and sewage caused toxic blooms of cyanobacteria that choked the algal balls until they almost completely disappeared. But now they're making a comeback. Since 2014, they have been spotted again, a sign that Lake Mývatn is returning to a more balanced state. Lake Mývatn is known for its rich bird life. It's where I got to see my first horned grebe. Roughly half of the Icelandic horned grebe population nests in the Mývatn area. Grebes are famous for their courtship, a beautiful coordinated water dance with each partner mirroring the movements of the other. They are territorial and defend their space with vigor. In late summer, flocks of horned grebes are found on the north basin of Lake Mývatn diving for their food. There was one young grebe I spotted just learning how to master the art of diving for dinner. It frequently called out to its parents for reassurance. In addition to being a UNESCO site, Lake Mývatn is also designated a Ramsar site under UNESCO's Ramsar Convention. This makes it a wetland of international importance, largely due to the vast number of birds that nest here. On the southern edge of Lake Mývatn runs the river Kraka, which has created a rich wetland system called Framengja, in Icelandic meaning outer meadows. This outer meadow has supported farming communities for hundreds of years. There is a folk tale of the troll wife Kraka, who is seen as an enemy of these people. She stole sheep and fish under the cloak of darkness. It's believed that one night she was late returning to her home in the highlands and had to sleep in her boat. As with many trolls in Icelandic folktales, she turned to stone as the first morning light reached her. If you want to see Kraka's boat, you will find it on the slope known as Nokfrabrekka, about halfway between Mývatn and Skessuhali. The boat is similar in shape to those that are generally used for fishing on the lake. There's a pile of rocks in the stern of the boat that is believed to be Kraka, in her final resting place. The troll legend is only a part of the rich local traditional knowledge that contributes to the sustained community-level effort to conserve this critical area in the face of a changing climate. The story of Kraka and the river Kraka that bears her name is more than just a fanciful tale. As with other Icelandic folktales, myths, and sagas, it's a story that speaks to the desire to protect and conserve the natural resources that the people of Iceland depend on. The challenges may have changed over time and are still changing, but their commitment to their land is extraordinary. In this region in particular, farming has been limited to grass and hay to feed livestock. That means that the local communities supplemented their food supplies with fish from the lake, waterfowl, and the rock ptarmigan. Yet their practices have tried to be sustainable, especially regarding the waterfowl. That's because they refrained from hunting the tens of thousands of ducks that nest and breed here. Instead, they collected their eggs, and even there, restraint was used. You see, when ducks suspect that their nest has obviously been disturbed by a predator, they will promptly abandon their nest. From their perspective, it's too risky to continue and lose the entire nest. Better to move and try again. So the people of Mývatn collected their eggs in a specific, limited fashion, usually less than half of the eggs in any given nest. This careful practice was out of respect for just the right amount of predation that birds are willing to accept before they call it quits. The same couldn't be said for how people treated the rock ptarmigan. Relentless hunting. This contradiction represents the complexity of Iceland that persists today. As we journey through this magical and mystical place, you will see it is not an uninhabited wilderness. Rather, it's a place where people are still striving to live in harmony and balance with the natural world. It is a place where nature, humans, volcanoes, glaciers, and a changing climate all collide and influence each other, both in the past and in the present. In the end, I hope you will come to see the depth of Iceland and appreciate its richness. For now, I leave you with the translation of an 1839 poem by Jónas Hallgrímsson called A Toast to Iceland. He was one of Iceland's most beloved poets. Known as Ostmush Thuthanesh, his nickname, meaning the darling of the nation. Our land of lakes, forever fair, below blue mountain summits, of swans, of salmon leaping where the silver water plummets, of glaciers swelling broad and bare above earth's fiery sinews. The Lord pour out his largest there as long as earth continues. This poem paints a picture of the country I have come to love and excited to share with you. It's powerful to see the majestic landscapes that ice and fire continue to carve and construct. Further, it's enlightening to learn how the people and culture have existed within Iceland throughout its history. They are inspired to explore the land in many ways, with spectacular art and by writing about it in beautiful poetry and epic sagas. Of course, to better understand how people interact with the land, you first have to discover how this island came to rise from the sea.